I think the biggest dichotomy all Barack Obama, although if we could do it, if it works, do it again. But she has to envelop her message in that the future under me, as a white person who farms corn, or a white person who is on the labor lines in Michigan, or is somebody who is in Arizona who is on Medicaid trying to make ends meet, this election is about hope. You don't have to be scared every day of somebody who looks like Maria, right? You don't have to be scared of somebody whose last name is Cardona. Right? Bakari Sellers is not a threat to you.
That's right.
Right? But what we can do is if we find some unifying bond together, then we can build this country on hope, not fear. And that's the difference. We don't have to talk about the rapist and the felon and all this other stuff. We know who Donald Trump is. Kamala Harris has to define herself as the candidate of hope.
She can do that. She can absolutely do that. It is not us against them.
Correct.
It is America against Donald Trump, quite honestly.
But
and
you're right, Bakari. She has to say we're better than what
yes,
better than
yes.
that.
We can turn the page in our country to a brighter day, and that is not under Donald Trump.
I'll be so curious to see what message is conveyed the way it is. And the timeline we're talking about seems like it's pretty short to be able to convince, convey, and demonstrate one's identity. Everyone stay with me right here. I've got to take a short break, but when I come back, I'll be joined by Democratic Congresswoman Barbara Lee. What does she think of her fellow Californian leading the top of the ticket? And does she think America is ready to do what it has never done before, put a woman in the White House? We'll talk about it next on this Sunday night where you're in the CNN newsroom. Well, you know, since Biden's decision not to seek re-election, we're talking hours ago at this point, there has been a significant push for Democrats to rally around Vice President Kamala Harris as the party's nominee. But the big question everyone's asking in the days to come is, will the Democrats fall in line behind her? Well, Congresswoman Barbara Lee of California joins us now. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I am dying to know what you make of President Joe Biden's decision not to seek re-election any longer.
Laura, thanks so much for having me this evening. First of all, I think, you know, President Biden put country over self. And I think we need to take a moment today, especially, to thank him. We owe him a debt of gratitude for what he has done throughout his life as a 30, 40, 50-year public servant in the elected office, but also as president and vice president. I mean, he is a transformational president. Not everyone agreed with everything he did, but I can tell you one thing, life is much better for so many people. I mean, just think, $35 capping insulin, 15 million jobs, the largest and boldest climate policy ever. He focused on racial equity and economic equity and justice, reproductive freedom. I mean, there were so many initiatives and policies that he championed that may or may not have been popular, but I can tell you one thing, he worked for the people. And we really need to take this moment and say, thank you, Mr. President. We owe you a debt of gratitude.
He certainly will be defined as the public servant that I know that he hopes to be and is and has remained. And this is a moment of such significance, Congresswoman, to think that he now falls behind two prior presidents not seeking re-election, likes of Truman and LBJ, obviously for very different reasons. But he not only said he was not going to seek re-election, he gave a full-throated endorsement of his vice president, Kamala Harris. Are you going to endorse her?
I already endorsed her, Laura. I endorsed her when she ran for president, actually the first time. I think I was the first member of Congress to endorse her then. And she's ready. She's experienced. She's been in the White House 3.5 years. And she knows what she's doing, and she cares about people. She cares about young people. She cares about people who haven't been seen. She cares about the middle class. You know, she cares about making sure that our democracy is protected. Here we have a convicted felon who's trying to destroy our democracy. Vice President Kamala Harris is a prosecutor. I mean, look at the comparison there. Here you have someone who's trying to establish a dictatorship, who's a pathological liar. Here we have a woman of integrity, someone who is experienced, someone who's ready, someone who can hit the ground running, and someone that I hope the party, and I believe that the party will unify around and move forward and make sure we connect with voters and make sure that we win. It's not going to be easy. We all have to do our part.
Excuse me, I didn't want to talk over you, Congressman. My apologies. But, you know, the numbers, the donations that are coming in, I mean, since the announcement, you've got the progressive fundraising group Act Blue said that they have raised $46.7 million. And these are just in the hours since Joe Biden withdrew. They are saying that this is the largest fundraising day of the 2024 cycle. This says a lot about enthusiasm where there has been a gap before. But then there are some who are using the word coronation. They're saying, is this the way to do this? Should there be a contested convention? People are certainly rallying around her in the donation, and certainly delegates seem to be attempting to commit their own delegates to her. Do you think that there will be the unification around her in the days going forward to avoid a contested convention?
First, Laura, I'm a member of the DNC. And we have a process and we have rules. And I can guarantee you we are following the processes and the rules. And we are naturally counting delegates. There are those of us who've endorsed her who want her to be the nominee. She's ready. She's prepared. But we have to do the work. And I tell you, people are excited about her becoming the nominee. And the DNC and the processes will be adhered to. There's no coronation going on. I mean, come on. We have a short amount of time to do this. We have to connect with the voters, and we have to make sure that we beat Donald Trump. And so as a member of the DNC, I know all of us are adhering to the rules and the processes, and will move forward accordingly.
You know, many black women across this country, dare I say globe, have seen a similar pattern play out where somebody has earned their position and earned the seat that they are in, even if they had to drag a chair to that particular table. And then there are those who will question whether they ought to be there. She is frankly, going to be in line for a number of very extraordinary vitriol. A woman in politics, you well know, a black woman in politics, you know even better. How do you think the electorate, and frankly her opponent now, Donald Trump, is going to approach her?
Laura, you know I know. I've been in
you
the elected office 26 years in Congress, 7.5 in the legislature, worked for a member of Congress as its top staff person for 11 years. And so the challenges are there. But quite frankly, I know that, as Dr. Maya Angelou said, and still we rise. This is about unifying everyone. It's about connecting with voters. No one is going into this looking at it through rose-colored glasses. Vice President Kamala Harris is prepared and she's ready. And she's a woman of color. She's a black woman. She's a Southeast Asian woman whose mother was from India, who's raised in a multicultural environment, who understands people of other cultures, who understands the world in which we live, who understands foreign policy and national security issues. She's ready. She's prepared. And people have to, understanding the barriers and challenges that black women constantly face. We have to fight through those. We have to push through those. And those of us, and I hope everyone is ready to do this. And I was on the call for a while, 35,000 black women tonight. I mean, people are ready. Black women lead. And we know how to form alliances because we know that Vice President Kamala Harris fights for everyone. She sees those who are poor. I work on issues around poverty. Poverty is endemic in so many communities, and in low income and poor white communities, and disproportionately impacted in communities of color. Lifting people out of poverty, child tax credit, children's poverty, hunger, all those issues cut across lines. So I think she can speak to constituencies all across the country, especially in those states where she has to win, because she connects with people, she cares about people, and she sees people. And we have to just fight hard. We don't have a lot of time, but we're going to do it.
Well, there's less than a month in the DNC, about 100 and some days until the election. There's a lot of time that can pass. I'll be very curious to see how she is reintroduced to the electorate now as possibly top of that ticket.
Shirley Chisholm. Remember Shirley Chisholm, first black woman to run for president in 1972. That's how I got involved in politics. That's why I registered to vote. And she went to that convention, and she was a major, major player at that convention and paved the way for this day. And so we cannot let the legacy of Shirley Chisholm be disappointed in this moment. And so we've got a lot of work to do, but we're going to do it.
Congresswoman Barbara Lee, and to all the women who've had to drag a chair to their own table, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Nice being with you.
Well, a CNN poll of polls average finds that Kamala Harris is, in fact, neck and neck with Donald Trump, within the margin of error, I should add, in a hypothetical matchup between the two. I mean, it's only been a few hours since there was actually the announcement that she would possibly be the person to do that. And there are these 6 polls conducted by CNN in June. It includes a CBS YouGov poll taken after the assassination attempt on Trump. Well, joining us now is pollster and communications strategist Frank Luntz. Thank you for being here, Frank. I mean, listen, we were talking like 2 days ago about the potential of whether Biden would stay in the race or not. Now here we are, just like 48 hours later, and the entire landscape has changed. But voters have been saying that they did not want a 2020 rematch, right? Well, they're not going to get one this time. How does this decision impact it?
First off, landscape, you even changed sets.
I did.
So I'm looking behind here. 1 minute we're looking at these colorful dots, and now we're looking at the White House.
Every now and then I got to change it up, you know.
This does open it up. We had only 4% who were undecided between Trump and Biden. Now, as you look at those numbers, the undecideds have increased. The states that matter are still the same states: Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. The voter equation to actually get to those states has changed. Republicans are still doing surprisingly well among working class voters, people who live paycheck to paycheck, but clearly the African American vote is going to increase, the female vote's going to increase. For Harris, if I were advising her, I'd say focus on women 18 to 34. That Biden was not doing well among them because he didn't relate to them and they couldn't relate to him. They can absolutely relate to her. That's her advantage. Her disadvantage is being in charge of immigration. And you're going to hear that the Democrats are going to say that's an unfair charge, but it was her responsibility.
Well, it's an unfair charge. Obviously, just to make the point, fine. Successive presidential administrations have not been able to, quote unquote, solve the problem of immigration, but voters see things very differently at times.
And that's what's key. And I recognize the Congresswoman's passion and intensity. And that's something that did not exist during the Biden campaign. And we're going to see a lot of that. But in the end, it's not their passion, it's what voters learn. So the question then becomes, can you name a specific success of this vice president? And she does care. I agree with that. I understand that. But her caring is different than the voters knowing that she cares. In the end, it's not what she says, it's what they hear that matters. And she's got a way to go to defeat Donald Trump. He's got a very high negative, so does she. He's got a lot of people that will not consider voting for him, so does she. In the end, it's going to be the double haters once again, who don't like Donald Trump's persona, who question whether she's ready for the job. And both of them are relevant and legitimate. And it's going to be important for people like me not to put my finger on the scale, but to acknowledge what's really there. With him, it's his persona and some of his policies. With her, it's some of her policies rather than her persona. And you know what Trump's going to do. All these ads of her laughing at interviews or her not knowing her brief. And for her, she's going to show Trump at his most anti-female responses and his most angry responses. I believe this will be the most negative campaign that we've ever witnessed. I am convinced that we're going to have a different turnout ratio than we would have had under Joe Biden. She's a better candidate, and Donald Trump needs to take her seriously, but she's still got a way to go to prove that she's ready for this job.
Let me ask you, first of all, I always kind of chuckle. For some reason, there is something so offensive about a powerful woman laughing. I'll never quite understand why, but it offends so many people compared to a man. But then you've got this idea before today. You were talking about different people who possibly would be a contender against Trump. And some of the names included New Jersey Senator Cory Booker, Maryland's Governor Wes Moore, former New Orleans Mayor Mitch Landrieu. It is an endorsement by Biden, though, for his Vice President Kamala Harris. Are any of these people now, in terms of a partnership of running mates, would that elevate her opportunities and chances?
And I'd be looking at someone, I think the most likely vice presidential nominee is the governor of Pennsylvania.
Josh Shapiro,
yes,
really?
Because this is a different situation. If she's the nominee, he makes perfect sense.
Why?
Because that brings Pennsylvania. Josh Shapiro is popular in the state. That's one of the 3 states. And he understands the industrial Midwest just as J.D.
Vance.
J.D. Vance, thank you. And that's what's going to matter most. These 3 states, working class voters, people who live paycheck to paycheck, people who feel ignored, forgotten, and left behind. And it's going to be which one, either Trump or Harris, can better connect themselves personally to the struggles that these people are having. And it's real. 25% of them do live paycheck to paycheck. And it's unclear. I can't tell you as a pollster who's going to win this. I could have told you this 3 days ago, 2 days ago. I'm now as befuddled as everyone else, but I can promise you that the person who wins those 3 states is the person who's absolutely elected. And that working class paycheck to paycheck voter is the one who's going to make the difference.
I got to tell you something very energizing about the idea of not being able to predict the results in a democracy. That's certainly what it's supposed to be about. Frank Luntz, thank you so much. More of this unprecedented evening in American history when we come back.
around 70. Thursday and Thursday night, showers and thunderstorms likely. Highs in the lower 80s. Lows in the upper 60s. Friday and Friday night, showers and thunderstorms likely. Highs in the mid-80s. Lows around 70. Saturday and Saturday night, mostly cloudy. A chance of showers and thunderstorms. Highs in the upper 80s. Lows around 70. For more detailed weather, water, and climate information, please visit our website at weather.gov/Atlanta. Here is the hazardous weather outlook. This hazardous weather outlook is for portions of north and central Georgia. For tonight, scattered thunderstorms will continue across south and east central Georgia into the evening and overnight. The strongest storms may produce frequent lightning, bursts of heavy rainfall, and gusts to 40 miles per hour. And now the extended outlook for the period Monday through Saturday. Scattered afternoon and evening thunderstorms can be expected through Saturday. Severe weather is not anticipated at this time. Spotter information statement. Spotter activation will not be needed through tonight. The current time is 11:46 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Here are the 11 p.m. weather observations from around the area. At Atlanta, it was cloudy. The temperature was 73 degrees, dew point 69 degrees, relative humidity 87%, wind south at 7 miles an hour, pressure was 30.09 inches and rising. Around Atlanta, at Chamblee, it was mostly cloudy and 73, wind southwest at 5. At Marietta, it was cloudy and 74, wind calm. At Mableton, it was cloudy and 73, wind calm. At Peachtree City, it was cloudy and 73, wind calm. At Lawrenceville, it was cloudy, wind calm. At Cartersville, it was cloudy and 77, wind south at 6. At Kennesaw, at Hampton, it was mostly cloudy and 72,
Yes,
wind
and I think
south
they'll throw
at 3.
everything against the wall. Whether it is the
Covington,
underbelly
with
of
rain,
what
it
this
was
country
70,
is, or whether
wind
it's
calm.
trying to hang immigration around
At Monroe,
her
it was
neck.
mostly cloudy
It can
and
be a number of
72,
those things.
wind
And again,
calm.
I mean, we
Elsewhere
win,
around the
Democrats
region,
win on
at
issues,
Athens,
right?
it was cloudy and 73,
we lose cultural
wind calm.
wars repeatedly.
At
Like that is
Gainesville,
just something
it
we
was
don't
mostly
do. It's
cloudy
not a
and
thing.
75,
You know,
wind calm.
our former first lady said when
Macon,
they go
it
low,
was
we go
mostly cloudy
high.
and
From South
72,
Carolina, that means
wind
when they
calm.
go low, we go to hell.
At
But
Columbus,
everybody doesn't
it was cloudy and
necessarily like
74,
take that mantra,
wind calm.
right? And so what we have to do,
It
and I
was
believe
mostly
what the
cloudy
Vice
and
President will
75,
do, is be
wind
able
southeast at 6.
to do some of the, like tomorrow,
At Rome,
this is
it was
simple thing. One of
cloudy
the
and
most popular
78,
person in the
wind
country
south at
is going
5.
to be the
At
head coach
Chattanooga,
of Florida
it
State
was
women's
mostly
soccer
cloudy
team,
and
right?
73,
Because that's going to be
wind
her
calm.
first act as while
Asheville,
the president
it was
is
cloudy
recovering
and
from COVID and
66,
people are going to want
wind
to see
calm.
what she looks like
At
behind
Augusta,
that podium,
it was
et cetera, et
mostly
cetera.
cloudy.
She has to accept that and then again meet voters where they are.
Can she do that? And I mean, you know this is going to be brutal. We're not going to pull any punches here. You heard Frank Luntz saying this could be the most and the ugliest political race of our times, which is saying a lot. We've seen a lot of ugly in the days in the past. What should she be doing to get ahead of it, around it, or through it?
I think that she expects it. I think this is nothing new to her. As an AG and as a senator, the races that she, not just the races that she had to go through to get there, but the issues that she dealt with as AG, those are not pretty. The issues that AGs deal with every single day, those are not pretty. So she knows what the underbelly of this country is, and she knows that it is going to rear its ugly head. So she's very prepared for that. And the other thing is, meeting voters where they are, she already has done that. Let's remember the 2022 red wave. A big reason why it didn't happen is because Vice President Kamala Harris went out and met voters where they are. She went to Black universities, Latino universities, white universities, talked to all these communities about the reproductive issue. That is why Roe v. Wade was the one reason, a huge reason why Democrats did so well in 2022.
I mean, Shmichael, Donald Trump's campaign is going to have to thread a kind of needle. There is a real risk of alienating people the harder you go in a campaign. And I know that's probably what they're accustomed to in trying to hit below a political belt. Does it pose a different risk for them now that it's Kamala potentially?
I think it does. She's a woman of color. She's going to be the first woman of color to be the nominee of a major party. There's just no way around that.
And she's a qualified incumbent who's formidable, right? I would
be lying if I tried to ignore that fact. I think from the Republican perspective, you're going to hit hard on the economic front. You're going to talk a lot about inflation and say, look, Joe Biden's inflation is Kamala Harris's inflation. Joe Biden immigration failures are Kamala Harris immigration failures. You're going to look at the foreign policy issues. You're going to say those are also at Kamala Harris's doorstep as well, because she was with the president along the way. I hope we stick to that message and focus on swing voters, focus on suburbanites with that targeting. Will there be some who may go beyond that? Probably. But I hope we just stay away from some of the points that Bakari was alluding to in terms of some of the worst instincts of our past, because that doesn't benefit anybody. I think it's a great thing that there's now going to be a competitive person on the Democratic side. Republicans have an opportunity to continue to run a competitive campaign and make the case for why Trump should be reelected.
Evan, let me get to you here, because there's a lot of talk now. Before it was who was going to be the running mate of Donald Trump. Now it's who will be the running mate potentially of Kamala Harris. What names are you hearing? Because we're hearing names like Pennsylvania Governor Shapiro, Kentucky Governor Beshear. Who do you think?
Well, there's also Roy Cooper of North Carolina in the mix. You know, what's a notable fact about all of those people is that they do represent a new generation of politics. And one of the things you heard Frank Luntz say a moment ago was that it's partly about voters between 18 and 34, who, let's face it, all of us have had the experience over the last couple of months of talking to young voters who are completely checked out. At the end of today, or the last 24 hours, they're not checked out anymore. They're going to decide whether they ultimately are going to be inspired by Kamala Harris and who she runs with, but they are checked in at the moment. And, you know, depending on how you measure it, there's about 5 million Gen Z and millennial voters in the cities in swing states who are tremendously important. And all of a sudden, they were in a race that they didn't care about. They're going to care about this race now.
So what do you think, Ashley? I mean, the lean in, it was going to be a J.D. Vance, Kamala Harris debate, and that's no more. Do you think that Trump is likely to debate Kamala Harris, number one, or will he do a kind of proxy campaign ad to try to minimize her instead?
Okay, so it was supposed to be a J.D. Vance and Kamala Harris debate, but J.D. Vance had yet to accept the invitation. We have an Urban Dictionary word called shooketh, and I believe Donald Trump is shooketh to debate.
You got to explain it.
Google. We all got Google. Google means he's scared. He ain't ready. You kept saying she was an AG, and all I kept hearing is she a G. Like, Kamala Harris will go and go toe-to-toe, 10 toes down with Donald Trump. She will prosecute the case just like she did against Brett Kavanaugh in his Supreme Court confirmation hearing. And I think that is what young people, when I think about building the coalition that we built in 2020, that was my job. And when the vice president got tapped in that moment, then Senator, man, she was on the phone every day almost with me. Like, what are we doing for young people? What are we doing for Latinos? What are we doing for AAPI? What are we doing for rural voters? She understands the people where they are, and she wants to go and communicate. She doesn't want to be in her ivory tower. But Donald Trump is shooketh.
I want to point out something, particularly about the 3 women who are on this panel tonight. Because regardless of how good of a lawyer you are, or the experience you have, or the fact that you've been around politics and know the ins and outs of it, people always look at you 3 and ask, do you belong here? Right? It doesn't matter what you're doing. As a woman in this country, do you belong here? And so one of the first questions Kamala Harris is going to have to answer, and I want to be very sensitive to what Shermichael said, because it is a legitimate point when you talk about the polling and all of those things. People should hear his point, is that voters want to believe, not the ones we're talking about, not the ones who are on the calls we're talking about tonight, but the voters who don't feel their heart palpitate when you say Kamala Harris's name. She's been caricatured so much. She's vice president, so inherently you don't know her task. She has to be able to show that she can do the job. Now, is that fair? No. But we know that going into it, right? And so And so does she. And so for all of those individuals who are like apostles of hope, like that's what you have to be when
That's
you're
right.
like you got to go out and be an apostle of hope. For all those individuals who are apostles of hope and trying to answer those questions, you can't start with the history, because we all know that. You got to start with the fact that she is battle scarred, battle tested. She knows the job of president. She can do the job of president. She's the only person who's been there, done that,
Right.
and she can do it.
Can I add one more thing, though? Yes, I think this will excite the base, and you need that. You need your base to be with you to get you to a winning point. But in 2020, we also had Republicans for Biden. Today, there was a tweet we need to verify, but that the Nikki Haley PAC endorsed, the double haters. Yeah. I'm talking to Never Trumpers. I talked to Never Trumpers after the debate, and I said, so what we gonna do? And they're like, LFG, and I'm not going to say that on
don't get fired
Google LFG, but that's the text that I'm getting.
Laura, go to commercial.
I'm just gonna say this.
I said the acronym.
Okay, I'm just gonna say this. Imposter syndrome does not live at this table.
That's true.
You belong. You belong, and I know I do. Evan, Ashley, Bakari, Maria, Shermichael, who all belong. Thank you so much. Look, it's nearly Monday morning on the East Coast of the United States, and the presidential race here has been turned on its head. Another hour of our breaking news right after this short break. Don't be shooketh. Stay with us.
Wind calm. At Gainesville, it was mostly cloudy and 75, wind calm. At Macon, it was mostly cloudy and 72, wind calm. At Columbus, it was cloudy and 74, wind calm. At Birmingham, it was mostly cloudy and 75, wind southeast at 6. At Rome, it was cloudy and 78, wind south at 5. At Chattanooga, it was mostly cloudy and 73, wind calm. At Asheville, it was cloudy and 66, wind calm. At Augusta, it was mostly cloudy and 79, wind south at 12. At St. Simon's Island, with light rain, it was 79, wind south at 7. Here is the official forecast from your National Weather Service for the Atlanta listening area. This afternoon, showers and thunderstorms likely. Highs in the mid-80s. Southwest winds around 10 miles an hour. Chance of rain 60%. Tonight, a chance of thunderstorms. Showers likely, mainly in the evening. Lows in the upper 60s. Light south winds. Chance of rain 70%. Monday, a chance of showers and thunderstorms in the morning, then showers and thunderstorms likely in the afternoon. Highs in the mid-80s. Southwest winds 5 to 15 miles an hour. Chance of rain 60%. Monday night, mostly cloudy. A chance of showers and thunderstorms, mainly in the evening. Lows in the upper 60s. Light southwest winds. Chance of rain 40%. And now the extended forecast. Tuesday through Wednesday night, showers and thunderstorms likely. Highs in the upper 80s. Lows around 70. Thursday and Thursday night, showers and thunderstorms likely. Highs in the lower 80s. Lows in the upper 60s. Friday and Friday night, showers and thunderstorms likely. Highs in the mid-80s. Lows around 70. Saturday and Saturday night, mostly cloudy. A chance of showers and thunderstorms. Highs in the upper 80s. Lows around 70. For more detailed weather, water, and climate information, please visit our website at weather.gov/Atlanta. Here is the hazardous weather outlook. This hazardous weather outlook is for portions of north and central Georgia. For tonight, scattered thunderstorms will continue across south and east central Georgia into the evening and overnight. The strongest storms may produce frequent lightning, bursts of heavy rainfall, and gusts. Spotter information statement. Spotter activation will not be needed through tonight. The current time is 12:01 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Here are the 11 p.m.
CNN breaking news.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Laura Coates in Washington, D.C. A pivotal, unprecedented night in America. 3 weeks ago, there was the consequential presidential debate between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. It's hard to believe it's only 3 weeks ago, but it was, in fact, 3 weeks ago. And now the sitting president dropping out of the race for the White House. And in short order, then turning around and endorsing his vice president, Kamala Harris. Well, tonight, Democrats are starting to rally around Harris as she, quote, intends to earn and win the nomination. Democrats greeting Biden's exit with an avalanche of cash to the tune of more than $46 million and counting, energized by even the prospect of a Harris top-of-the-ticket campaign. I want to bring in CNN White House correspondent Priscilla Alvarez. She's in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, with the President of the United States. Priscilla, what have you learned about how this seismic, and I do mean seismic, announcement even came to pass after weeks of defiance?
Well, ultimately, the last 48 hours were pivotal. The president is self-isolating in his Delaware residence here because of his positive COVID diagnosis. And it was during that time that he was also deliberating and reflecting. We're now learning that the president on Saturday evening huddled with his senior advisors who were here in Rehoboth Beach. And they assessed the polling. They talked about what Democratic lawmakers had been pleading the president to do, which was to step aside. And it was during that time that the president was starting to come to the decision that he was going to drop out of the race. He also, of course, consulted with his family. They have always been pivotal in almost all of his decisions over the course of his political career. But then today was ultimately the day that the president decided to announce that he was going to drop out of the race. And this was so tightly held that it was only 1 minute before the president published his letter publicly that he was on the line with the senior White House and senior campaign officials to advise them, to notify them that he was going to withdraw. And of course, this shook the political world as the president announced that he was not going to seek re-election, and then shortly thereafter said that he was going to endorse Vice President Kamala Harris and urge the Democratic Party to get in line and to support her. Now, sources also tell me that the vice president didn't know about this decision until today. That's when she was informed by the president that he was going to step aside from the presidential race. And then they spoke multiple times over the course of the day. And Vice President Kamala Harris has since then been making multiple calls to Democratic officials over the course of the day to try to earn their endorsement. Now, we should also note, Laura, that in that letter from the president, he said that he was going to address the nation. We're still trying to get clarity on when exactly that is. Of course, the president is still recovering from COVID. The White House doctor has provided routine updates to say that he is improving and his symptoms are improving, but we still don't know when or where the president wants to address the nation. The White House putting out his guidance this week, which doesn't shed any light in terms of what his schedule is going to look like as he is in recovery. But certainly that is going to be a speech that all eyes will be on as the president tries to seek some sort of unity in his party, which for weeks now has been completely divided on whether or not he was the best candidate for them in this divisive election year.
Priscilla Alvarez, great reporting. Please keep us informed. Also joining me now are CNN political analysts and commentators. We've got Ashley Allison, Ron Brownstein, and Scott Jennings. So much is happening right now. It's almost like news through the fire hose again. Let me begin with you here, Ashley, because this is probably an incredibly hard decision. I mean, Biden's biographer, Evan Osnos, told us just in the last hour that some White House staffers felt the news was a, quote, bitter defeat. For others, it felt like a kind of a relief. I wonder how you felt when you heard that news.
Well, look, I mean, Joe Biden has been an excellent president. He still has 6 more months to serve. And I put a post on Instagram. I said, run through the tape, Joe. Finish strong. You still have executive power to do executive orders, to continue to forgive student loan debt, which is such an important issue for so many young Americans and people my age suffering with that debt. Of course, it was a hard decision. Joe Biden believed he could get the job done, but he talked to some of his closest advisors and family and came to the conclusion that it's not about him. It's about our country. It's about our party. Unlike his former opponent, Donald Trump, who had lost in 2020, continues to be the party nominee, continue to put candidates up in the midterms that lose. So, yes, it was a terribly hard decision for Joe Biden because he cares what happens to this country, but he also did something extremely historical in passing the torch to Kamala Harris, his vice president, and I think history will remember him well.
I mean, Ron, one word I keep hearing tonight has been energy. It's a jolt. It's it's an adrenaline rush. All of these things are all being described. How will the energy, though, translate into the general electorate? Is it going to be a flash in the pan or sustained?
No, I think for Democrats, there will be much more energy than there would have been sticking with Biden. I mean, no one in the Democratic Party believes that Kamala Harris is a sure thing. There are lots of questions about whether she can beat Trump any more than Biden could. But I think Democrats felt a certain amount of, inevitability to the Biden situation. They have had the airwaves to themselves this year, Laura, in the swing states, almost completely, almost unrebutted, spending tens of millions of dollars. And Biden's approval rating in those states was no better now than it is nationally, which suggests that there are an awful lot of voters who are basically done with him and had tuned him out. At least with Harris, you get a chance to reset the race, create some new contrast. Suddenly, Donald Trump is the older guy. And I think the version I've heard from many Democratic strategists and pollsters and consultants is that, yeah, her floor might be lower. We don't know how good she will be at this. She was not a great candidate in 2020, but her ceiling is almost certainly higher. And that was a risk that seemed, I think, to most Democrats worth taking at this point.
I mean, she's got 4 more years practically of experience as well, and now the incumbency aspect of it is going to factor in. And there is the name recognition as the vice president, and I do wonder if the notions of electability become moot compared to the conversations 4 years ago. But Scott, let me bring you in here because the Trump campaign has been preparing for weeks for the possibility of running against someone who is not President Joe Biden, although in Milwaukee, Biden was the focus. How does this moment change the race for the Republicans?
Well, they're prepared for Harris because I think the Republicans assumed all along that if Biden jumped out of the race, that the Democrats would have no choice but to go for Harris, even though she has limitations along the lines of what Ron just described. They're already out with an ad tonight, basically saying all the Biden stuff that you don't like is the Harris stuff that you don't like. She's been right there by his side during the inflation crisis, during the border crisis. And on top of that, she has to answer for her own role in the cover-up of Joe Biden's condition. I do have to address, and Ashley, I love you.
Hold on, Scott, when you say the cover-up, I don't want to cut you off. I want you to finish your point. But I do understand what you mean by her role in the cover-up. You mean that the accusation that somehow she was aware of some infirmity, or that going forward she was aware of something different? What do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, I assume you've read all the articles about how this White House spent years trying to hide from the public just how bad Joe Biden had gotten. And I mean, she's right there. She was on TV every week saying, he's sharp, he's strong, behind closed doors. He's as sharp as a tack, the best we've ever seen. I mean, I'm sorry, but she was in on this. And it's obviously not true. Otherwise, Joe Biden wouldn't be dropping out of this race. Actually, by the way,
Scott, let me ask you,
asking Joe Biden to
wouldn't you also suggest? Oh wait, no, excuse me. You can hold on. Hold on 1 second. We can all hold, but it will be after I speak. Scott, on this point, what is the difference? And I'm asking how they're going to be able to market this point. What's the difference? Why wouldn't there be accusations against, say, Speaker of the House Johnson or anyone who's met with President Biden over the past several months or the year to suggest that they too were knowledgeable about what you are intimating? How do you, as a strategist, and how do you, to the electorate, make that distinguishing feature so that you're only targeting what she would know versus any member of Congress?
Yeah, I mean, why should we expect Kamala Harris to know anything, right? She's only the vice president of the United States who's been sent out time and again for months and years to tell us how sharp and as a tack that Joe Biden is. Look, the reporting on this is clear. Every major media news outlet in this country is now deeply reporting on all the steps that were taken to try to hide from the public what was going on with Joe Biden. And you've got a litany of people from this White House, from the Congress, and the top-ranking Democrat who was part of this litany going out into the public and lying to us about how he is was Kamala Harris. So I suspect what they're going to say is not only is she in on all of the policy deficiencies you're mad about, she was also in on the lying, and that's going to call into question her credibility. That's my point, and I think it'll be an easy point for them to make.
Well, it'll be a nice turn from the, what is it, I'm in it for Joe Biden to then she was in it. That's, I'm sure, that the next T-shirt we're going to be actually seeing at this point in time. But I am curious how the electorate will view this, Ashley, because, there will be ample opportunity to criticize both of these candidates going forward, and whoever it is she may pick, should she get the nomination, as her running mate as well. And the questions are swirling that Scott has mentioned. What does the Harris ticket need to do to address the points that Scott is raising?
Well, there's no cover up. Joe Biden has decided to step out of this race because his close advisors told him that there is not a path to victory. And so rather than making it about himself, he is saying, I understand the threat that Donald Trump poses to our democracy, and if I can't beat him, I'm going to give a pathway for someone else to beat him. I think in terms of the record, look, the narrative around the border, Maria Cardona, our colleague, just was saying that border crossings, illegal border crossings, are lower now under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris than they were under Donald Trump. So we can have a conversation about immigration. Also, what I will say is that when the Biden-Harris administration put forth a bill that a very conservative Langford from I believe Nebraska, Oklahoma, thank you, it's late, put forth and said, here's a pathway. It was a conservative supported bill. It was probably going to get through the House and the Senate. Donald Trump said no, because I want to play politics. So we can go tit for tat for who did this and who did that. But when it comes to people, particularly Kamala Harris, saying to middle class workers in the Beltway or in the Midwest and the Sun Belt, I have a plan for you that protects union jobs, that creates a pathway to the middle class, that gives you child care. We have a plan. Donald Trump does not.
Let me ask you, Ron, and bring you in here, because I am curious, one, how voters you think might be seeing these two different arguments that literally are optically on the left and right of you right now on the screen. But also you've got somebody who was a bit of a thorn in the side of Democrats throughout the tenure that he has been a senator. I'm talking about Senator Joe Manchin, who was once a Democrat, now is an independent. And there are sources close to him saying that tonight he is considering re-registering as a Democrat and maybe throwing his hat into the ring. What do you make of that possibility?
Well, first, let me talk about what we've been discussing. I agree. Harris will have the same vulnerabilities on policy as Biden does, particularly about inflation and the border. The voters are discontented with Biden's record on that, won't be any happier with her on those issues. The big difference is that unlike Biden, who really has not had the capacity to drive an offensive message, Harris will have the ability to, I think, more effectively articulate what is the Democrats' best argument against Trump, that he represents a threat to Americans' rights and values and democracy itself. That's been her job since Dobbs. She has spent 2 years pushing back against what the Supreme Court has been doing, what red states have been doing. If you look at her answer at the Essence Fest about the Supreme Court immunity decision and compare it to Biden's response at the White House a couple of days later, it gives you a perfect encapsulation of why Democrats think she can be more effective at prosecuting their best argument against Trump. Don't forget, Biden was already trailing Trump by 10 or 15 points on who voters trusted to handle the economy. That meant Democrats are going to have to convince millions of people who think Trump is better for their bottom line to vote against him anyway. And Harris is just much more skilled than Biden is at this point at delivering the argument that represents their best chance to do that. As for Manchin, it's fine. I don't think it's going to be a hugely relevant factor. I mean, there is an audience in the Democratic Party. There are Democrats, consultants, voters, strategists, donors who worry about Harris's ability to beat Trump, and someone is going to, speak to that audience. But it is not, I think, in any the candidates who might actually threaten her, someone like Gavin Newsom or Gretchen Whitmer, they're not running against her. I think this is going to consolidate around her very fast, and Manchin will be, as you described him, and as he often was in the last few years, more of a gadfly and a thorn in the side of Democrats than someone really capable of setting the direction for the party.
I know we have to go, but I want to hear from you quickly, Scott, on this point. I know you guys are coming back. Does Harris's ascension to the top of the ticket make the Senator J.D. Vance selection a better or worse idea?
I don't know how to do that algebra yet, actually. I guess maybe some of it will depend on who Harris ends up choosing for vice president. I did want to comment on one thing Ron said about her, sort of going out and trying to make the case about democracy. I do think this hurts Democratic arguments on democracy. I mean, Joe Biden got millions of votes in the primary. He's now effectively been overthrown by a handful of elites and rich people. Now Harris is going to end up with the nomination through what they're calling a process, but it's obviously rigged. So the party of democracy is now disenfranchising millions of Democrats and handing the nomination through a process set up by elites to someone who did not earn it. I do think this makes it a little more complicated to go out and say you're the party of democracy when you've sort of operated your party in a very undemocratic way.
I'll be curious. Kamala Harris was on the ballot. To be clear, they spoke 14 million voted for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
Ron, I couldn't hear you. What did you say quickly?
Not the president.
I'm saying, you can't really compare what's happening now to what Trump did after the 2020 election, culminating in January 6th. That's really kind of specious.
But you know what? We'll leave it as a cliffhanger for now and see if Scott has a response to that specious claim. Everyone, thank you. Stay with me here right now. And shortly after Biden announced he's out of the 2024 campaign, the head of the NAACP thanked the president for his service, but seemed to stop short of endorsing Kamala Harris in that moment. NAACP President Derek Johnson joins me next. I'm Laura Coates in Washington, D.C., and you're in the CNN Newsroom.